welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of a novella that I've read in one extremely fun, slightly stressful sitting. It is such a blast to read, and I am so excited to talk about it. So welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
My name's Larry Hinkle, and my book is The ERIS Ridge Trail. It's a cosmic horror road trip with dogs.
That description is what sold me on it immediately when I saw Yep. And I had encountered one of your stories in The Rack, edited by Tom Detty, who was on the show sometime last year. So I was excited to see more of your work.
Tom's a good friend of mine.
Oh, great. Yeah,
He
I
he
love
blurbed this one. He actually wrote the foreword for my collection
Oh,
last year. So
oh, very nice.
that's not why I made it into the rack, though. I'm saying
Your
I
own
made it in there because
narrative.
it was a good story.
Yes. Yeah, so could we talk a little bit about how you got into writing and what led you to this project?
Sure. I When I was younger, I mean my mom got me started loving horror at a way too young age. I mean she had a huge horror book collection, and it was so many that my dad had to build a bookcase that took up an entire wall of the living room. And the rule was pretty much I could read whatever I could reach. So as I grew, I could read more and more things. So I've always loved horror, and I've always loved writing. I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And when I went to college at the Ohio State University, and this is the only bad thing I will say about Ohio State is that I got beat up in my creative writing class so bad that I quit writing for about 30 years. It was very much like how Borderlands used to be, where you turn the stories in, everyone gets to critique them, but you're not allowed to defend yourself. And I mean, I wasn't very good at that point, but man, if I just had like the world's thinnest skin, and just it was awful. So I just quit. I just kept reading horror all the time and watching horror all the time. I just didn't write it. But then I ended up going into advertising. I went to the school of journalism. I was going to be a journalist, and then realized that I hated talking to people, so I couldn't interview people. So I decided to become a copywriter, an advertising copywriter instead. I've been doing that for since 93, so 30 years now. And over the years, I just built up a much thicker skin, since 99% of the work you present to a client doesn't get produced. Um, and then about 10 years or so ago, an idea popped into my head. And I said, I'm going to start trying to give writing a chance again, and just started writing. I sold my very first story I wrote when I thought, oh, this shit's easy. I can do this. And then I didn't sell another one for 18 months. So I realized this isn't as easy as I thought it was going to be. Started going to StokerCon and everything. Took a whole bunch of classes, and then got a lot more serious about it in 2017, 2018. So I've been doing it. I mean, obviously not full time, but much more structured, trying to write as much as I can. And for the past, see, I told you I can't math. What is 2018 to now? 7 years, 7 years or so. Yeah, I've been doing it a lot more focused on writing. And then what was the second part of the question?
Oh, what led you to this project? I'm particularly interested in the inception point. Was it a particular character or an image
Oh,
or?
this one actually, there are four stories in my collection, The Space Between, that came out last year. The title story, a story called Strange Constellations, a story called Lost at Last, which and that one, and the story The Tunnel at the End of the Light. The last two, Tunnel and Lost, were both written to process the deaths of my dogs, Sammy and Coco. And all four of those stories, they all had endings that were satisfying endings, but they were also open-ended enough that I always wondered what else was going on with them. And my friend Tom and another real good friend of mine, Krista Carmen, were always on me to write something longer, because I'd never written anything longer than 5,700 words. And they just kept hounding me like nonstop. So I finally said, well, I'll try to write a novella. And I was trying to come up with ideas. I thought, well, I don't know where those four stories go. Let's just see what happens. And it gave me a chance to spend more time with Sammy and Coco. But by no means do you have to have read the stories in the collection to understand the ERIS Ridge Trail. I mean, they're just like you would just get extra depth for some of the characters. But the novella is a totally standalone book, which I mean, you didn't even know there were stories, and you read it and got everything. So yeah, that was where I came with this, and I just kept exploring those worlds and the characters in there, and just sat down. And I'm a total, I was a total pantser, and got into it a ways. I was taking the novella writing course from Crystal Lake Publishing, and you get to do an hour-long Zoom call with Joe Meinhardt, who runs it, and he's great to talk to about fleshing out your ideas. And he started asking me all these questions about plot, and I had no idea. He's like, "Well, what's going to happen next? And what happens with this? What happens with that? And what's the theme of this? And blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Dude, I don't know, man. I just sit down and just make stuff up." Um, so he convinced me that I needed to do an outline. So then I actually sat down and outlined it. Although, it didn't stick totally to the outline. There were many branches and side quests, but eventually it got to where I wanted it to be at the end.
Nice. Yeah, it sounds like an interesting journey, and I am so excited to talk about the dogs. But first, I have a question. If you could just tell our listeners a little about the Eris Ridge Trail and its four travelers.
Okay, yeah, the trail is it's this is a cosmic horror story, and the Eris Ridge Trail kind of just meanders through space and time, and it's very easy to get lost on it because lots of people do, but it's virtually impossible to get off of it. And as it goes to a lot of places filled with monsters. There's some sci-fi elements to it. There's some fantasy elements to it. There's time travel and time loops and cosmic horror and scary monsters. But it interacts very strangely with electricity. So whenever there is a lightning storm, which there are frequently, or when people who cross over with their cell phones until their cell phone dies, it also interferes with it, to the point that the trail is constantly changing the landscape. So you could be walking and just walking along, and you could turn around behind you, and what was behind you is totally different now. You'll go instantly from a forest to a mountain range to a desert to a frontier town. There's one scene where they end up in the town that's basically a recreation of the town from High Plains Drifter, which is my favorite, Clint Eastwood spaghetti western. Of course, it's not quite the town, because then they go into a room filled with doorways that ends up bad things happening. And the characters on it, Eric and Coco ended up there. They ended up there through going. I don't want to give away all the spoilers from the short story, but they ended up going through tunnels in the bottom of the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park. He and Sammy ended up on the trail. They were hiking, and this was actually part of the impetus for the story. I ride my bike a lot, and I was riding on it one day, and just off the side of the trail was another trail that I had never seen before. I mean, it had logs on it, to mark it and everything. I was like, I've ridden by this thing for 4 years now. How did I never see this trail? And Wayne and Sammy are hiking in the Arapahoe National Forest up near Idaho Springs, where we used to live in Denver. So I'd hiked there some, and they see a trail that they'd never seen before. So of course you go and explore it, because that's what you do, and that's how they get on the Eris Ridge Trail. And Craig ends up on it. He was abandoned in the middle of a desert, or the middle of the space between Omaha and Denver, which is a ride I used to do all the time, because when we lived in Omaha, because I'd go back to Colorado where my business was. Oh, and then I'm totally I can't give that away because that's a spoiler.
Yeah, yeah, we don't want to do
Yeah.
that.
Okay. No more spoilers.
That's a great introduction, and I think it gives readers a good sense of what's in store while preserving a lot of secrets. Now, I would love to talk about
I
the
totally forgot about Shelley.
oh,
Oh,
Shelly.
Shelley's the fourth character.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. She ends up there. She's doing an interview with old Bob about the corn maze he has, and he gives her a shortcut to go home at night, and the shortcut ends up being not a safe shortcut. And that's how she ends up there. So I can't really tell you much more about her 'cause her story is like way radically different than everyone else's story when she finally shows back up. So
Yeah, it's really interesting to see them on their individual journeys and then see them, come together and their personalities interact. And I really actually do love the presence of the dogs in the story. Coco and Sammy, their personalities really shine through on the page. And yeah, could you talk about what it was like? Yeah, writing your dogs and getting to spend some more time with them this way.
uh, it was awesome, but it was also it's kind of melancholy is maybe the right word because I just miss them both terribly. Coco, she lived to be 18, and we got her when she was an 8-week old puppy at the no-kill shelter where we used to volunteer in Columbus, Ohio. So I'd had her forever, and she basically just died of old age. Sammy got lung cancer, and we had the vets we were living in Omaha, and we had to take her to Ames, Iowa, where Iowa State University is. So it's like a 4-hour drive, and they removed half of her lung, and she was doing well, and then she got pneumonia, and because of that, she just never recovered. So it was really hard, because I was in the room with both of them, holding them and stuff. And it just sucked. So that's why I wrote the two short stories just to help process the grief of that. But yeah, it was great spending time with them here because, they had very distinct personality. They were buddies, but they were very different dogs. Coco was, um, Coco was very, very, very smart, but she was also very, I don't know, short-tempered is the right word, but she could be, she would get irritated sometimes if she would do a trick once and then you try to get her to do it again. She, well, I just did it, I'm not doing that again. And whereas Sammy was just a cool, chill dog. Sammy used to sit under my desk when I was writing, and I used to just joke that she was giving me the words, you know. So yeah, it was fun getting to spend time with them again, even though it's not, I mean, I know it's not real, but I'm still on an adventure with my dogs,
Yeah.
and that's
They're,
because Coco loved to go hiking.
oh,
Sammy, Sammy, we'd have to trick into hiking, and we get like halfway on the trail, and she would just look at me like, "Oh, Larry, is this hiking? I don't like hiking." Yeah, we'd go to the dog park. There was a big dog park in Evergreen, Colorado. We'd take them there, and it was a really huge fenced-in area, but it had trails that went through the trees and everything. And every time we went there, she would just turn around and go back to the gate and sit. She's, I'm not hiking that. So she would just wait for me and Coco to come back. So,
yeah, you can really see those personalities in the book. And, as somebody who, I live in apartments now, so I currently have cats, but I grew up with dogs. And as somebody who spent a lot of time with dogs and lost some as well, and has lost a cat I really loved, it was very poignant. And it really made me think about like how it's nice to, how you do just through your memories and putting them on the page, get to spend a little bit more time with them and honor them in that way. That's really lovely.
oh, thank you.
Yeah. I'd love to talk a little bit about the world of the Eris Ridge Trail. I would love to know like how you choose what to show, what not to, what to explain, what not to, because really it's the mysteries that keep you reading. And I love that like a novella lets you be sort of minimalist and not give away too many answers. So could you talk about shaping this world on the page?
I think since this is the first long form thing I've done, a lot of it, like I said, I did have an outline, but how much to share, I kind of winged it.
Mm.
If I knew what was happening, then I could explain it. But sometimes you're just writing, and you're like, holy crap, I did not expect that to happen. I wonder how that happened. But then you don't really know, so you don't really explain it. But I don't like having I don't like it when everything is explained too much to you. That's we always have a you know Paul Tremblay always gets a lot of flack for the ambiguity of the endings of his books. And we have an excuse me, an expression in our writing group when you say you need to tremblay that ending, you give it a little more ambiguity there. Like if you don't want to be too on the nose and explain everything to the reader. You want them to think and have to work things out for themselves as well. That's why I have there are a lot of Easter eggs in the book. There are Easter eggs to fellow author friends who I have to like their towns or characters or something from their stories. There are a couple Dark Tower and The Stand Easter eggs in there. There's one for Joe Landis as the drive-in, and it's one of those things. If people get it, great. They're gonna be, oh my God, that's really cool that you. But if they don't, they'll never even know it was an Easter egg. But by putting them in there, it kind of really expands the story, and I don't have to expand it. By just putting that reference in there, they get, oh my God, this kind of takes place in the same thing. And I know everything that happened in this story. I wonder if it's going to happen in this story. And it's to me, I don't want to say it's a cheat, but it's an easy way to expand the world of your story without having to expand the world of your story, because that's a lot of work.
100%. And I love that idea. First, I love tremblay as a verb. Like that's really great. And and it speaks to, I think, how important it is not to always give readers what they want or what they think they want, right? Because most readers think they want answers, but sometimes if you get too much closure, you don't spend that time then thinking about the story the same way as if there's unresolved tensions or questions unanswered. I think it helps the story linger a lot longer too.
Yeah, I think I gave everyone in here a satisfying ending, but again, it's a very open-ended ending where it just you see how each person ended up. It's like, oh wow, I wonder what's going to happen for them next. It's because it doesn't just end like, everyone lives happily ever after. But that's all I can say about that.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about those Easter eggs you just mentioned. I loved the gunslinger joke. And there's the Stanley Hotel, which you mentioned. Um, I love that you talked about it in the context of like how you helped it make the world seem expansive and larger. I'm curious about what else is sort of in your horror DNA. Like what did you grow up reading? What left a real impression on you?
Well, I mean, obviously Stephen King, but everyone says Stephen King. But mom had all of his stuff, so I read all of his stuff. The first horror thing that I can remember is it's the background on my picture here was going to see the Night of the Living Dead at a Dust to Dawn drive-in my parents took us to at a way too young age. I think they expected it was the last film of the night, so means it was probably on like at 3 in the morning, and I'm sure they expected me to be asleep. But I distinctly remember being scared to death, and there were people dressed as zombies roaming the drive-in lot, hitting people's cars and things. And while it was scary, it was still the coolest thing ever. And I bet you since then I've probably watched that movie over 100 times. I mean, it's my favorite movie. Um, and I sit there and it's like background music for me sometimes, because I just know all the dialogue and everything. But yeah, growing up reading, my mom would take me to the library every Saturday, and it was basically she let me get whatever book I wanted, and it was almost always horror. I mean, there was some sci-fi and there was some fantasy, but horror is definitely it for me. And it's cool now that that being in the community, I know so many of these authors. Like the last weekend I was on Easter, I was at Brian Keene's bookstore in Columbia, Pennsylvania, and it's friggin' Brian Keene. He wrote The Rising and all this shit. And I'm in his bookstore signing my book, you know. That's just awesome. It's just crazy. People that shaped me as a writer, I know them now, and I just can't get my mind around that sometimes.
So cool. And I think it's great to have that because parts of the writing process are so isolating. You have to spend a lot of time alone in order to get a book to the finish line. And so horror just provides this like, I mean, I'm sure all genres do, but like the horror community seems like particularly joyous and encouraging. Um,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
not. You see everyone just walking around and in black and everything, and then we're all scary goths, but it's really the nicest community. Everyone is really supportive. Everyone's really friendly, and I love it. I'm glad to be part of it. My little teeny corner niche with my two books, but I'm working on it.
Excellent. Yeah, well, that is my next and final question. What are you writing right now? What is on the horizon for you?
I am writing. I took a page, a cue from do you know who Sam Rebeline?
Hmm.
He wrote Edenville and The Poorly Made. Well, The Poorly Made is it's a short story collection, but they're all connected stories that take place in his Renfield County universe. And my next book that I'm working on, I've got three and a half of the stories written now, is going to be a short story collection of connected stories that all take place in, on, or around the ERIS Ridge Trail. So it's going to be a lot more exploration of the setting of this book. I don't know yet at this point if any of the characters from the novella are going to show up. So far, the three and a half stories that I've written, they haven't. And I've probably got outlined in my head, roughly, not outlined, but I know t excuse me, what 10 of the stories I think are going to be, and they aren't in any of those stories yet, but they could show up as ancillary characters, or they may end up, I may end up writing a whole new story about them. I don't know, but that is my next thing that I'm actively working on now, and then just writing the occasional, short story that you see for a call or something. Because I I'm I've always been a short story writer just because in advertising, I learned to write short. It's very hard for me. I see people, um, I went to Todd Kiesling, his book launch thing the other night. And he's talking about how like a couple hundred pages he cut out of his new novel. And I'm just thinking, how is that possible that you could I write it and I'm like, this needs to be longer. It's like keep adding things and adding things. I can't imagine having something that big that I could cut out of a book. So yes, my next thing is going to be short stories. I'm going back to short stories again, but because they're all semi-connected, it's kind of a longer piece, but kind of not. So it's kind of a hybrid.
Yeah, I like it's kind of like a constellation of a novel, this sort of
Yes. A strange constellation at that.
yes, yeah, not from our Earth, a different solar system's
Yes.
constellations. Well, thank you so much for coming and sharing your book with us. I am so excited to recommend it to our patrons.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. You can get it on Amazon. If you go to my website, which is thatscarylarry.com, you can get a signed copy of it or my collection. I got signed copies there also. There was another magician named Scary Larry, so I have to be, oh, that Scary Larry is where that came from. So
Excellent. Well, thank you for letting us know where to get it. So, yeah, listeners, check out the Eris Ridge Trail. It is such a good ride, and I think you're really going to enjoy it. All right, it is now time.
cool. Thank you.
No problem. It is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.